Greetings, mortals, and welcome to this highly anticipated video on the September 2014 AMA. A survey of Infinity Blade lore would not be complete without a look at those sources of information outside of the games. Podcasts, videos, Q&As, and more over the years have given fans access to a myriad of new information, which has done much to clarify and explore the lore. Undoubtedly, though, some of the most critical info has come from community outreach on the Epic Games community website and forums. It may even be fair to say that one cannot develop a complete understanding of the Infinity Blade story without the information conveyed in the September 5th, 2014 AMA with Donald Mustard. Due to the unfortunate closure of these forums and the removal of the Infinity Blade trilogy from the App Store, however, records of things like the AMA have been lost, and inaccurate and uncited information has grown in number on pillars of the online Infinity Blade community like the fandom wiki. In light of this, you'll understand my excitement when I realized that the bunch of text I had thrown into a Word document in late 2014 was, in fact, a record of this long-lost and important AMA. What I managed to save was the text from 2 forum posts compiling information from the AMA. They are presented here, with my commentary, for the benefit of the remaining community. I did not, nor do I claim to have written these questions or answers, but unfortunately I do not have a record of, nor was I able to find out who originally compiled this information. With this said, I'd like to give my sincerest thanks to the members of the Epic Games forums who, among other magnificent community efforts, wrote these questions and compiled their answers. I am indebted to them. As the information I have related to this AMA was saved from 2 separate posts, it will be presented in 2 sections, one for the raw Q&A format and another for the condensed bullet point format. For the purposes of this video, and to prevent confusion, I'll be keeping the condensed bullet point format to the PDF version of this AMA. To check out this info, or follow along with the video, check it out in the description down below. For a little about the AMA, approximately 32 hours after the launch of the final update for Infinity Blade 3, version 1.4, Kingdom Come, creative director and co-founder of Chair Entertainment, Donald Mustard, visited the Infinity Blade branch of the Epic Games forums for an impromptu AMA. The resulting thread covered a wide range of topics and characters in the lore, as well as a little bit about Chair itself. Section 1 encompasses the raw Q&A format. The format of this post makes it the most comprehensive and reliable as, aside from some introductory notes and organization done by the original compiler, the information is in its original form of pairs of questions and answers. The post was organized into categories, which will reflect in the organization of this video. Something else that will be reflected is the involvement of the community. In the spirit of the original AMA, community members have lended their voices to read these questions. You can also expect me to pop in on occasion to read the aforementioned footnotes. So with that said, let's get started.
About what time would Infinity Blade actually take place? I've always thought of it as about 25,000 years in the future.
That's about right.
This is the first of several answers with what I have dubbed accidental retcons, because though official, these answers contradict some previously established and or supported point in the lore. In this case, assuming that the deviation chapters and Jori's birth are a maximum of 100 years in the future relative to the modern day in the 21st century, an estimate made based on the advancement of technology and similarities to the real world, Raidriar's own mention of his age puts the IB saga at taking place circa 12,000 AD. This is, at the very least, strongly supported by a dev comment from a cutscene file from the end of the first game. So this answer presents 2 possibilities. First, Donald Mustard typed out his answer without too much thought about the exact dates and what information came before. Or 2, the deviation chapters actually take place 15,000 years in the future relative to the modern day, and for some reason the world hasn't changed all that much. For example, relative locations like the Middle East are still referred to as such, and sports like baseball and hockey are still around. Personally, I'm going to go with the former.
Who was first, Ausar or Galath?
You know, that was so long ago. I think they have both forgotten little details like who is older.
In the video Infinity Blade Lore Explored Part 2, which came out some months prior to this AMA, the Mustard brothers confirmed that Ausar came after the worker. They declined to give a difference in age, with Jeremy Mustard only saying,
whether that's 5 minutes or 5,000 years, we won't say.
Yeah, fair enough.
Now, you could interpret this as another accidental retcon and grapple with the possibilities. 1. Donald Mustard typed out his answer without too much thought about what had previously been revealed. Or 2, the age relationship of these two entities was retconned and is now, as it once was, unknown. Concerning the former, as it was Jeremy Mustard who pointed out the relative ages in the midst of his brother's hesitancy, I wouldn't be surprised if Donald had forgotten about that fact here a few months later. Personally, I think these can be reconciled. That is, Galeth is older by some undisclosed amount, but neither actually remembers the details.
We know that once a Deathless dies, his QIP will seek out and enter a fully grown bud body. We also know that a Deathless can be made to rebirth as an infant through the Redeemer, as happened to Siris and Galeth. How exactly does this process occur though? Instead of a fully grown bud body, does the target Deathless's QIP seek out and enter an embryo bud body, or perhaps an infant bud body?
What you are speculating is mostly right. However, buds are not what dictate the shape and form of a body. It's the QIP. For example, even if Thane was able to escape the body he is in and transfer to a bud, it would pretty quickly mutate because his QIP is scrambled. Siris altered Galeth's QIP, not his buds. Make sense?
It's a little macabre, but I've long used the following as a metaphor for what the IB is supposed to do, as opposed to what happened to Thane. Scenario 1. If you could somehow temporarily remove someone's brain from their body and chuck it into a wall hard enough, their brain would be destroyed and that person would be done for. This is akin to how the Infinity Blade's actual blade kills the body, kicking the QIP from it, to be destabilized and ultimately destroyed. Scenario 2. Compare this to a situation where you don't take the brain out of the body, but still throw someone's head into a wall. With a certain amount of force, they're going to end up with head trauma that might not kill them, but would still inflict brain damage and affect them negatively long term. This is akin to how Thane's QIP remained in his body when it was destabilized, resulting in corruption. When the same wall would destroy a brain outside of the body, it only does long-term damage when housed inside what is supposed to be the protective casing of the skull. Similarly, where destabilization destroys a QIP outside of the body, it only corrupts it when still housed within.
How much do mortals know about the Deathless and who and what they are?
Depends on the mortal. We tried to give insight into that through several of the characters in the books.
About how many Deathless are currently living on Earth, the Moon, or other parts of the solar system? Also, how many Deathless are from the same era as Galeth and Ausar?
There are several hundred living Deathless in the IB trilogy time frame.
This answer confirms the information given in episode 16 of the Epic Games Community Podcast.
I feel this final update was to some degree a clue as to the direction of where the Infinity Blade series will go next. My guess is that it may be based in heaven. Am I crazy, or does heaven answer the question as to how the Infinity Blade works by sending a killed Deathless's QIP to heaven on the moon? As laborers and or prisoners, heaven could be one giant soul cell?
You are correct that Kingdom Come is a literal reference to the Kingdom to Come, both the one Siris and Issa will be trying to establish on Earth, as well as alluding to the potential mysteries on the moon. When a Deathless is killed by the Infinity Blade, their QIP is completely destabilized and they die forever. An interesting note, one of our fictional world's rules is that a QIP cannot travel through a vacuum. That is why the worker had to physically travel to the moon and could not just warp there by transferring into a stored bud.
A Lesser Deathless is a description of the Deathless's role in the Deathless Society as a High Lord and Lesser Deathless. Or does it affect their functionality too, by being killed easier or less stable QIP or weaker in other ways?
It is both a societal and a functional descriptor. Lesser Deathless do not have the power, wealth, or influence to acquire and maintain their own secret caches of buds. This makes them much more vulnerable to the manipulations, plotting, and scheming of the other Deathless.
Donald Mustard's answer here is unfortunately a little lacking. While he confirms that the title of Lesser Deathless is a societal and functional descriptor, he only elaborates on the societal implications this has. Allow me to fill in the rest. While we don't know anything about how Lesser Deathless are created, we do know that their QIP are more susceptible to destabilization, able to be completely destabilized by an almost, but not yet fully charged Infinity Blade.
You said Siris and Galeth are very, very old. Ausar/Siris have ancient Egyptian overtones, god of the afterlife. But the Deathless QIP would seem to require a much later, technologically speaking, time. Are we to conclude ancient Egypt is their origin? If so, how did immortality work before the QIPs?
Ancient Egypt is not their origin. They are much, much older than that. I like to think that the Egyptians based much of their theology on their misconceptions and half-understandings of the ancient Deathless. The QIP is innate in all living beings, just like your DNA.
This is our third accidental retcon. Here, Donald Mustard implies that all living things come with a QIP, but this contradicts what we hear from Tell in Infinity Blade Awakening. There, we are informed that it is in fact sentient beings that have a QIP. It makes sense to think that Donald Mustard misspoke, as something like a plant, for example, wouldn't have need of memories or a personality, the things that a QIP houses.
The equipment the Deathless use, is it exclusive to Deathless based on their DNA coding and QIP, or are they equipment anyone could use, even mortals?
Some of it is. Depends on the Deathless and their access to technology, their political influence, their wealth, etc.
Of the current population of Deathless in existence during the events that led to and include the trilogy, how many were considered masters of the Aegis forms and the patterns, and where did the pre-redemption Ausar fall in that spectrum in comparison to his Deathless rivals?
Less than 100. Ausar was the best of the best.
In conjunction with a previous answer, this one supports an idea we hear from Tell in Infinity Blade Awakening. There, Tell talks about how it could be argued that the Aegis forms came about due to a widespread mastery of the patterns of true swordsmanship. Donald Mustard previously stated that there are several hundred living Deathless in the Infinity Blade trilogy timeframe, and here he states that less than 100 were masters of the Aegis forms and the patterns of true swordsmanship. Unless tons of Deathless died off right before the IB trilogy timeframe, whatever that exactly means, this would imply that a significant portion of the current Deathless population are masters of course, the Aegis forms, but also the patterns. This would also seemingly place the advent of the Aegis forms much closer to the events of the trilogy than we might have originally thought.
How exactly was Galeth's experiment a failure?
Galeth sees himself as a god, and a bored god at that. This time around, he was toying with allowing others to become more like him, to see what they would do with power, to give himself some rivals. He just never expected Ausar to lock him in a soul cell. That really pissed him off.
Is part of being redeemed, according to Siris, to forget who you were? Can Galeth be redeemed but retain his former memories?
I think that Siris is just winging things to a large degree and going with his instincts. He knows the memory wipe is what helped him to change and hopes that it will give Galeth that same chance. Erasing someone's memory and turning them into a baby does not redeem them. Siris is only even beginning to redeem himself. He sees it now as his duty to make restitution for all the evil and horror he has caused. Maybe he can never do that, but he knows he has to try, and he's going to give Galeth the chance to do it with him and maybe find redemption for himself as well.
Are Ausar and Galeth related by blood or politics?
Ausar and Galeth have a very complicated personal and political relationship that spans epical amounts of time. Over the course of thousands of years, they have been friends, rivals, and everything in between. They're the very epitome of family, dysfunctional as it may be.
Since the Infinity Blade cannot deliver a true death to Galeth, is he a Deathless and he had simply installed a failsafe? Or is he something else? If it's the latter, is he one of a kind?
He in large part created the blade and installed a failsafe.
That Donald Mustard points to the former as being the answer implies, but doesn't necessarily confirm, that the worker is indeed a Deathless and not something else.
What was the actual purpose of Galeth launching the rocket at the end of the game, and what happened to it? Also, what purpose does heaven serve for the Deathless?
The worker intended to travel to the moon, where he could live safely for a few centuries or millennia, while the Earth smoldered. What happened to the rocket is a mystery.
When Galeth said to Siris that they destroyed this world a dozen times, does that mean they recreated it from scratch, or did they recycle with trace elements existing from previous incarnations?
Galeth is a scientist, tinkerer god. He has used many different methods to destroy and create.
Did the worker live on the moon when he was cleansing the world or when billions died?
That's where I would want to be if the world was being cleansed.
This is the first of 4 questions asked by a member of the Epic Games forums under the name of Archivist. For anyone curious, this is not me. This AMA took place long before I took on the name.
What would Galeth's company been called in the flashback chapters? Did you guys ever have a name in mind or something?
Huh. Weird. I guess we never actually named it. Probably something awesome like chair.
Do the events in Shadow Complex foreshadow a cleansing by Galeth? Is Shadow Complex canon to the IV world?
In my mind, Shadow Complex and Infinity Blade are in the same shared universe. That said, the bad guys in SC are not affiliated with any Deathless that they know of.
This answer has the potential to expand Infinity Blade lore a lot. On the one hand, you could take this headcanon of Donald Mustard, co-creator of the series alongside his brother, to be official canon. While this idea isn't much of a stretch for multiple reasons, we have to consider the official Infinity Blade canon likely isn't just based on what Donald Mustard thinks. Also involved in the story greatly have been, of course, Jeremy Mustard, other key members of Chair, and most importantly, Brandon Sanderson, who reforged the story into what we have today. Personally, however, I'm fond of this headcanon as it doesn't really present any kind of continuity issue.
Is Ausar older than the rest of the Deathless?
Ausar is very, very old.
What exactly led up to Ausar and Raidriar's duel on the plains of Koroth?
On the plains of Koroth, Raidriar killed Ausar with what he thought was a fully operational Infinity Blade. It's the events leading up to that moment that make for a really interesting story, but I'm not going to spoil that.
What happened to Ausar's body as soon as he was killed in Koroth, given that his QIP has been altered at that point? How did his QIP respond when Raidriar killed him in Koroth?
His body died, and his QIP was transferred to a bud, only instead of like normal, he had lost his memory and his bud became a small child. Because Ausar did not return, Raidriar and the Deathless world incorrectly concluded that the Infinity Blade worked one time, when in reality it still needed to be tuned to the Deathless QIP.
Can Ausar die to a fully powered Infinity Blade, or is he like Galen, who can't?
He has been killed by the Infinity Blade countless times. Now that it is charged, I wonder what it would do to him. Do you think the worker would have encoded Ausar's QIP to be immune?
Could the Infinity Blade be attuned only to Ausar, or could it be powered up by any Deathless that would be stabbed to death by it?
Galeth built it in a way that could only be attuned to Ausar, the only Deathless he even remotely trusted with a task so secret and dangerous. Whoopsie, too bad he did not see that soul cell coming.
This answer puts firmly to rest the common misconception that any Deathless QIP could charge the Infinity Blade. It also corroborates what we learned from Tel in Infinity Blade Awakening. Since the blade could only be attuned by the QIP of Ausar, or by extension, someone of his bloodline, the Infinity Blade was not activated by the death of Raidriar or Sadie, but Archerin.
After Ausar's QIP was altered by the Redeemer, what happens to his body upon death? Does it start to transform into an infant?
It might help to think of uninhabited buds as highly advanced biological 3D printers that are directly linked to a QIP signature. After Ausar's QIP was altered, he would have looked the same until the next time he died. And the next time he died was at the hands of Raidriar in Koroth.
To clarify the timeline of events that Donald Mustard is getting at, it starts with this collaboration between the worker and Ausar on the task of attuning the Infinity Blade. At some point before being imprisoned in the Vault of Tears, the worker betrayed Ausar and used the Redeemer to modify his QIP. This modification made it so that the next time Ausar was stabbed with the Infinity Blade, he would be reborn as a child with no memories.
Since Siris now has access to the QIP of Ausar, is it possible for him to get back his full memory?
Not all of it. It's been too long and was too tweaked by the consistent memory wipes. It's actually quite a mercy for Siris. I don't think he could handle the horror if he remembered it all.
Is Ausar's former lover a Deathless?
Good question. She could be.
There's a statue of a woman in the Vault of Tears. What did Ausar do to her?
He stabbed her.
When Siris obtained the map to heaven by defeating Lylendre in the Kingdom Come update, was she killed by an infinity weapon? During the dialogue, Lylendre mentioned that Ausar had said, quote-unquote, tantalizing things to her. Does that mean that they had a relationship?
Yes, Siris gave her the respite she was craving. Lylendre is now at peace. Lylendre sure seems to think that she and Ausar had some sort of relationship in the past, and I won't contradict her.
This answer, alongside the August 2015 AMA, confirms that Lylindre's death in the Kingdom Come update of Infinity Blade 3 was canon and, in fact, permanent.
Okay, so Siris seems to remember things from his past, so he should have known about the moon settlement. On the other hand, when Siris kills soulless Ausar, Ausar says that he knows secrets that even Glath doesn't know about. So how does he know more than Siris, and how did the cult bring him to life?
Siris is beginning to remember bits and pieces, and more is coming back all the time. But I don't think he will ever get the full picture. His QIP was too altered. The soulless Ausar, on the other hand, had a perfect memory of everything that happened right up to the moment of Ausar's death on the plains of Koroth. It's just that, as a soulless, its memory and sanity is degrading at a rapid rate. The worker was trying to sow as much chaos as possible as he prepared to bring the fire. Giving the cult access to one of Ausar's old resurrection chambers was part of that plan.
What are the secrets Ausar mentions as secrets even the worker knows nothing about, or at least the tiniest of hint?
The soulless Ausar remembered exactly how he betrayed and imprisoned the worker, among other things.
Did Ausar destroy the moon?
Ausar did not destroy the moon.
If Siris did get back his full memory without the personality of Ausar tainting it, what is the first thing he would do?
Weep, and then try to find a way to travel to the moon.
Is Raidriar now in heaven?
Depends on your personal definition of heaven.
What is the significance of Raidriar's moon/solar system hologram in the first Infinity Blade? Back when I killed Raidriar and saw the cutscene for the first time, I thought Siris was surprised seeing the broken moon. But we've seen it from Earth/Pangaea multiple times in later games, so that really couldn't have been such a surprise for him. Why is he taken aback by what he sees?
The significance of the hologram was the reveal to Siris and to the player of advanced technology in what seemed to be a fantasy world. This is what blew young Siris's mind. He had never seen magic like this.
Is Raidriar really dead?
I saw Raidriar get stabbed by a fully functioning Infinity Blade.
When or why did that hatred between Raidriar and Ausar exist?
They don't like each other for a lot of really good reasons, not the least of which even applies to immortals. Rivalry over a woman.
While it is a possibility, this answer does not assert or confirm that the woman they fought over was the one depicted in the Holy Ring tomb seen in Infinity Blade 2.
Was the Great Pact formed due to the Worker of Secrets imprisonment? Is Raidriar part of the Great Pact?
The Great Pact was formed to keep the worker imprisoned. Raidriar was part of the pact.
How did Raidriar and Ausar meet for the first time?
To be honest, that is not something we have actually totally decided yet. How long Jory went before even hearing whispers about Ausar.
In a fair fight, when Ausar and Raidriar are at full strength, can Raidriar hope to beat Ausar?
Nope, not a chance.
This answer is one of a few details which strongly imply that Ausar allowed Raidriar to win their duel on the plains of Koroth. Since the details surrounding this period in the lore are vast and often misunderstood, I presently assume this as my canon, but will try to expand on it in the future.
How could Issa beat soulless Raidriar?
Issa is amazing, and is just that naturally talented. Wondering who would win if Siris and Issa had a sparring match. Who do you think?
What's Issa's life like before she met Siris? Is she previously connected to his past in any way? Why did she try to steal the Infinity Blade from him when they first met? I mean, she's a thief, but there is stuff thieves won't just risk their lives to steal.
Issa was not directly tied to Siris or Ausar in any way before they met in the God King's throne room. She was there because she had been paid a lot to risk it. When she got to know Siris, she began to change her mind about a great many things. We love Issa, and we're so proud to have such a strong, empowered female playing a meaningful lead role in our game. There's not enough of this in games today.
This isn't to say that we don't know anything about Issa's life prior to meeting Siris. According to what we read in Infinity Blade Awakening, Issa is not native to Lantamore, likely knew her father, and is of Avrian ethnicity, as this is what Siris/Ausar refers to her as. In Infinity Blade Redemption, we also learn that she once did jobs for Deathless on a more regular basis.
Who does Tel work for?
Tel is an independent, self-aware being who is free. Tel is very loyal to Ausar, who is now Siris, and would never intentionally do anything against his wishes.
How does Tel know where to find the baby bud that Siris's QIP transferred into after each death as the sacrifice?
Part of his programming.
How did Tel know where to find the Redeemer? Who placed it in the carved slab, and when was this done? Pre or post the Battle of Karath?
Tel knows where the Redeemer is because he put it there. Because Ausar told him to put it there. This was done pre-Korath, but just barely.
Note that this answer establishes that the Redeemer was not on the plains of Korath during the duel between Ausar and Raidriar.
Is Ryth from Earth?
Ryth was born on Earth.
What is Ryth's backstory?
Look, I don't want to piss off Ryth by telling you more than he wants. I think it's sufficient to say that he is a Deathless who could not care less about anything other than glorious combat with an equal...
Is Ryth related to Galith or Ausar/Siris in some way?
Ryth is not a blood relation to either Ausar or Galith.
Why are Ryth, Siris, and Issa the only Deathless to use the Solar Trans technology? Is it possible to make an Infinity Blade out of one?
Because it is very rare. To make a solar trans weapon, you have to have one end of a transportation disk sitting in the sun. And there are not very many of those. As for the second part of your question, I'm not an expert at QIP destabilization rings and their harmonic tuning algorithms. You would have to ask the worker. My guess is no.
Was Ryth an ally of Ausar? Was Ryth Galith's ally?
Ryth is not really an ally of anybody. Ryth and Galith are not allies, but they are also not enemies. Ryth posed no threat to the worker's plans. If anything, distracting Siris just helped him. So the worker did nothing to interfere with Ryth and his desire to duel.
How did the Collector get sealed within the tomb?
He was not sealed in the tomb. He had just been meditating for a long time. But when his subconscious caught the glint of excellent craftsmanship, he knew it was time to continue building his collection.
Do you think you'd be able to explain the Collector's background without too many spoilers?
One of the reasons, besides the cool gameplay, we added characters like Ryth and the Collector, is to show that immortality affects everyone differently. I thought it was cool to have some very esoteric Deathless.
Was Gortel mutated during an experiment, or did he choose that form?
Gortel actually chose that form. He did not intend to be captured and trapped in a soul cell while in that form, but he did choose it.
This answer confirms that despite their appearance, especially in the case of Eolosiums, the cells of the Deathless Kings below the Temple of Lantamore were indeed soul cells, like the Vault of Tears.
In Infinity Blade 2, the Archivist says that it, the Vault of Tears, was once the home of the most vile evil to ever befall this world. He's been gone for ages, slain by Raidriar on the plains of Koroth. Many devoted believe him truly dead, yet here I study, ponder and question. The seals must never be broken, for he cannot be allowed to return. This is very confusing. Does he refer to Ausar or Galeth? We know Ausar is the vile one, but the seals sound like the Vault of Tears blood seals.
The Archivist volunteered to become one of the Blood Sentinels precisely so he could have unlimited access to the ancient home of Ausar, so he could study it relentlessly and ponder and question. When he first addresses Siris, he is directly answering his question as to what this place is, the home of Ausar the Vile. He then pauses slightly to get down to business, and without explaining to Siris or you, shifts from speaking cryptically about Ausar to speaking cryptically about the worker and says, "The seals must never be broken, for he cannot be allowed to return." He is a Deathless who is about to kill an interloper. He's not going to explain the nuances of his thoughts.
While this answer does clarify what the question was referring to, it's the fourth answer which seems to contradict what we already know. Here, Donald Mustard refers to the Archivist as a Deathless, despite the fact that we've been previously told in episode 4 of the Epic Games Community Podcast that the Archivist was not a true Deathless. I would just as soon call this another accidental retcon, but upon revisiting this podcast, I've come to the conclusion that the Archivist is in fact a lesser Deathless, or something of the sort. As Donald Mustard says in the episode, there are those who may be functionally Deathless, but don't have access to resurrection chambers, and that this is what the Archivist is. For me, this does little to establish the functionally immortal as their own thing apart from the Deathless, as, according to Donald Mustard here, there are true Deathless and the functionally Deathless who don't have Phoenix chambers. Donald Mustard wasn't kidding when he talked about playing with subtleties.
Was Thane an ally to Ausar?
Thane was absolutely not an ally to Ausar or Galeth.
Donald Mustard only says that an alliance was absolutely not the case between the two, but doesn't elaborate on exactly why. Depending on the exact details of the relationship between Ausar and Thane, this answer could be quite illuminating. For example, and most critically, was Thane around when Ausar was? If not, then that would explain why no alliance existed. This would, however, depending on how you interpret it, contradict Thane's line when he says that he is the first blood of the Deathless. If they did coexist, however, their interests must not have been aligned. Some in the community like to claim that Ausar was a part of House Ix, just like Thane, but if this is the case, it would seemingly disprove that possibility. Again though, this is unknown, and only remains a possibility.
Was Thane intended to look desperate/pathetic, or was that only the result of needing gameplay progression? The need for an easy first boss to open up the rest of the game?
You're not wrong in your line of thinking. We needed to design a character that looked awesome so that players would think that this was the God King of Infinity Blade 2, but that was also weak enough that it would serve the necessary gameplay. We thought it would be cool to have a Deathless who, while very powerful and skilled, was full of his own hubris. He is constantly underestimating the situation he finds himself in, thinking he's only facing a mortal or, at best, a lesser Deathless, never guessing that he was facing Ausar Reborn until it was too late. And then he turns his back on the worker? Obviously a very poor choice, but we put that there for a reason, to show how weak even the mightiest Deathless are when faced with the will of Ausar or the wrath of the worker.
What are the origins of the King of Dragons, Dragor? Was he made like the other dragons with some weird experiment or something else?
Yep. Weird science gone wrong, or totally right, depending on your point of view. Dragor was the very first dragon created.
What comes of the Iron Hunter? Where was he originally from?
He traveled back to his home and tried to pick up the pieces of his broken life. Eventually, he found happiness and solace. Late in his mortal life, he took an apprentice, like his masters before him, and taught him the secret forging techniques of the master weaponsmiths.
How do you explain Kira from the first Infinity Blade dying, but all the Kuroshino in Infinity Blade 3? What's the relationship?
Kuero is from the House of Kor, and was Lilindra's chief general who oversaw her elite guards, the Kuero Shino. Man, would she be pissed if she ever found out that Raidriar had him hidden away.
Are there other humans and Deathless currently living on the moon, also known as Heaven?
Yes, there are others already on the moon. Who they are and what they are doing remains a mystery.
We see some green stuff on the moon. Are those plants? Maybe wildlife? Is the blue stuff water supplies for the mortals that are maybe there?
The green stuff definitely looks like plant life to me, and there is no life without water.
What is that castle that we can see from the plains of Koroth? Is it Ryth?
We put that city in the background to represent the next phase of Siris's plan for redemption, to build a free city where mortals could live without the oppression of the Deathless.
A misconception related to this seems to be the idea that Siris built this himself. It's my guess that this city already existed in some form or another, and that it was abandoned as we see it in-game. I would guess that it was after the events of IB3 that Siris and Issa chose this city as a candidate for their plans.
What is the fate of Galeth's obelisk stronghold, and when was it created?
It's still there, and Issa is able to open the entrance. It's been there in some form for a long time.
This last sentence implies that, like the dam that the Vault of Tears is built on, it existed prior to the rise of the Deathless, during the Deviation chapters, and for some time in modern history. Cross-referencing the world map from IB3 with a real-world map of the Mediterranean puts the Ark in this structure somewhere in modern-day Slovakia or Hungary.
Who placed a statue of the unidentified woman standing with Ausar in the crypt? Was it the same person who entombed her immortal form and enshrined her in various locations in Ausar's personal fortress?
The Vault of Tears was Ausar's home. He is responsible for what you see there.
What are the nature of gems, and how do these gems compare to other minerals? Does everyone know how gems function, or is it knowledge reserved for Deathless and gem cutters only?
They're not gems in the way we would think of them. They're more like highly advanced microcomputers combined with Deathless technology. Most people think they are magic gems and have no idea how they are created.
How does one upgrade equipment to level 100? I've restarted my iDevice as you suggested elsewhere, but I still cannot upgrade beyond level 50. Have completed Death March 51.
Every 5 levels of DM completed increases the item max level by 5.
Why don't you want us to be able to fight the dragons more than once? It seemed in the beginning that they were supposed to come back stronger after you kill them, like the Deathless.
Dragons are not deathless. We wanted the dragons to feel like special, one-off events in the game, and that once you had defeated them, they were gone forever. I guess you could always start a new save slot.
Is there any chance we will get a widescreen update for Infinity Blade 1?
It's highly unlikely that we will be able to update IB1 anymore.
Is there a way to forge a Darkfire gem in Infinity Blade 3?
No, they are as rare as we intend them to be.
Are there additional Darkfire gems to be found or forged besides the 2 known ones?
Nope, there are only 2. We were nice and gave you one for Siris and one for Issa.
This is, of course, not entirely true. A total of 7 rare Darkfire 1000 gems were offered at one point or another. 1 from defeating Pisces, the second dragon, 1 from the obscure map, 1 as a Christmas gift from Chair, and 4 from Aegis tournaments. Due to a glitch, however, it was possible to have even more in the form of Darkfire 500 gems, which can be upgraded. This is also not to mention the 4 rare Spectrum attack gems, also available at one point or another.
Do the blade / axe of heaven possess unique qualities other than as the items for unlocking the observatory tower?
No special qualities other than being very rare keys that together grant access to one of the most important locations on the planet.
Why is the Helio set not included in Update 1.4 Kingdom Come?
Because not everything can be in the game, and to help give IB2 and IB3 their own special separation.
Can we get the Vocus suit in a future update for Infinity Blade 3, those available with all his magnificence?
The worker's shield is not really a shield. It's a cool custom particle effect and would not work correctly in our item system. Sorry.
What do you wish Infinity Blade could have supported or had that wasn't already there?
I am actually really happy with everything we were able to push mobile devices to do. I think the gameplay is very tight and polished, and that the meta structure of the game is awesome. I love that each of the 3 games has its own unique identity, and that we were able to fully execute our initial vision for what a high-end mobile game could be.
Is this the end of the Infinity Blade series, or just Siris's?
This is the end of the Infinity Blade trilogy. We have so much more we can do and intend to do more of everything at some point, but only when it's the right time and we can make the exact game, book, movie, etc. we want to make to extend the story appropriately. We are lucky to have a very talented and creative team, and we have many ideas we want to pursue. We feel we're at the right time and place in Infinity Blade to pause for a bit, focus our efforts elsewhere, and return to IB when we're ready to do more.
What were all of the creative inspirations for you and Jeremy growing up that would lead to the inspiration for Infinity Blade? List all, maybe?
For anyone looking for a complete list of things which inspired Infinity Blade, this list is a good start, but is missing some important entries. Karateka, for one, is a 1984 action video game for the Apple II that inspired the one-on-one dual format for the trilogy. The Hunt for Red October inspired the language change from Pangean to English at the beginning of IB2. In the film, the crew of the Soviet submarine Red October speak Russian for some time at the beginning. Later, during a dialogue-heavy scene, the language switches to English to make following the plot easier.
Все, иду как тац, блажен, бодрствующий и хранящий одежду свою. И он собрал их на место, называемое по-еврейски Armageddon. And the 7th angel poured forth his bow into the air, and a voice cried out from heaven, saying, "It is done."
Jeremy and I are inspired by many, many things. I could never list them all, but here are a select few. Books: Edgar Rice Burroughs, you must read A Princess of Mars, Tarzan, and the Outlaw of Torn. And Brandon Sanderson, you must read The Way of Kings and its sequel. Best book I've ever read.
Donald Mustard had some interesting run-ins with these inspirations, as I'll explain in the footnotes to follow. First, Donald and Jeremy were in fact such big fans of Sanderson that they worked for 6 months to get in touch with him to bring him on board.
Comics. The original Marvel G.I. Joe run by Larry Hama, like issues 1 through 85-ish. The Dark Knight Returns and Batman, year 1 by Frank Miller. Any Chris Claremont or Peter David X-Men or Wolverine. Toys, pretty much all we played with was Legos and G.I. Joe action figures.
The first comic book Donald Mustard ever owned was Wolverine number 11, written by Peter David. Cher would go on to work with David on Shadow Complex, with him writing the script.
Movies. Some of our favorites are Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Empire Strikes Back, The Matrix, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, and Pride and Prejudice, BBC version. TV shows, as of late, some of favorites are Lost, Fringe, pretty much everything J.J. Abrams touches. Breaking Bad, Sherlock, Legend of Korra.
Donald Mustard also went on to have a cameo in the 2021 entry in the Matrix franchise, The Matrix Resurrections.
Games, Super Metroid, A Link to the Past, Final Fantasy VI, Pac-Man Championship Edition DX, Shadow of the Colossus, Super Mario Bros. 3, and Mario Galaxy.
Any plans to release more Infinity Blade collectibles, such as lithographs or prints, in addition to the 3D figures? Maybe sell a few full-size Infinity Blade replicas?
You never know. We are always looking for great licensing opportunities.
How did your team decide on making a trilogy, and how far ahead did your team plan with gameplay changes, graphic enhancements, and story with the later installments?
We had the idea for the story a few years before we even began to think about the game. At that point, we liked the idea of a trilogy that would set up the universe. When we had the chance to make the game, we hoped it could be successful enough to spread across a series of games and planned the story accordingly. From a gameplay standpoint, we had lots of ideas and limited time. So we focused on the core first, which was the sword combat. After that was right, we were able to layer more of our ideas through IB2 and IB3.
I've always been curious about who voiced Siris and Raidriar in Infinity Blade 1. I don't think it was in the credits.
We made IB1 so fast, we literally did not have time to record real actors. All the voices are folks from Chair and Epic, most notably Zach Bellica, the audio director at Epic Games. That said, for IB2 and IB3, we cast Troy Baker as Siris, BioShock Infinite Final Fantasy XII. And we were absolutely thrilled to have cast John Noble, one of our favorite actors, from Fringe, Lord of the Rings, etc., as the Worker of Secrets. He did an amazing job.
Unfortunately, despite my efforts to determine who exactly on the Epic Games audio team lended their voice to which role, exact voice credits are still unknown.
Do you play your own games often?
I play them like crazy as we are making them, and then I play nothing but those. For the first few weeks, they are out. I play each update as it's released as well. I then try and play them every year or two to see how they hold up and what lessons there are to learn. Was playing Undertow on XBLA just the other day and still think it's an amazing game. It's fun when I walk in the room and see my kids playing one of our older games. Of course, I always love me some Shadow Complex.
And that wraps it up for Section 1. Once again, to read the information in Section 2, check out the PDF version of the AMA in the description down below. You'll understand why I chose to exclude it. If you've made it this far, let me just say thank you for your time. With how long of a document this turned out to be, compiling and editing it for the PDF, not to mention this video, has taken way too long. Of course, much of that time was spent reaching out to and collecting voice lines from the readers who contributed to this video, and a massive thanks to them. These are Andy, AngryGirl number 2342, AVerySmartNameForMe, Borealis, brothervictus, Chlorondria, DarthNoscoper, DegiBlaze, Drolkill, Ex Machina, Fennecorn, Grant No, IBRecollection, Ivy Studios, Justin, K, Lexy, LezGedDisBred, LizardWizard, midgitfeet, Punkman, Simmons, SorinMarkauv, Stepanov, tornadoConspirator number 4536, TheGifKnight, the Planeswalker, the Sanderson Collector, Vile Majesty, Ultra XFO, Wizard Agenda 214, and Isu. Again, a massive thanks to these readers, as well as anyone else involved in this video or the AMA, whether now or back in the day. If you're looking for more Infinity Blade lore content, be sure to check out my videos, as well as the Important Lore Videos playlist I compiled, which has a lot of good info in it. With that said, I've been the Archivist. I'll see you mortals on the next one, and hell take us.